Get both of us in there? All right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, hi, how are you?
Good, thanks.
I'm
How are you?
Alex.
Rachel, nice to meet you.
I represent Mary Jo Gossett.
Right, I understand.
Right, and I'm excited to talk to you because I think that, my client is just a little concerned about kind of what's been happening, and with the departure of Mr. Cobb to Gitanic Cruise Lines, we just want to make sure that, that I want to make sure that I represent my client. I want to make sure my client feels comfortable with kind of the way things settle, because she loves working for this company. She loves this company, Bacchus, and wants to continue there. But just want to make sure that we hammer out details as far as how we're going to move forward with her employment there.
Right.
So it's kind of our initial idea, and I think that at this point, what we want to do, at least what I want to do as Ms. Gossett's attorney, are just a couple issues. First, just kind of, like I mentioned, kind of how her employment would look moving forward at the company, and kind of what your ideas around that would be. And then also just the discrimination issue, which Ms. Gossett has iterated to me kind of over and over again about how she's uncomfortable with the gender discrimination situation that she perceives in this kind of entire scenario. And so just kind of wanted to open it up to you now to give me your initial thoughts about what's going on from your point of view, because all I've kind of got at this point is my client's point of view.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me say that, as I understand from the folks at Bacchus, Mary Jo is a wonderful employee. She's a huge asset and has a lot of value to the marketing team. And we're very interested in keeping her on. So first and foremost, that. So Mr. Cobb is leaving. As I understand it, there hasn't been a final decision as to who's going to take over his spot.
Oh, there has not been a final decision.
So, in terms of being able to tell you definitively, how that situation has ironed out or will iron out, I can't at this point.
Okay. So it's the people who are who are going to be determining who that person is are still kind of in the process of figuring it out.
That's right.
So they're still considering a number of factors. Are there any criteria that you know of that they're using to determine who's going to be filling that spot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So you do know those criteria.
Yeah. So it's a number, as I understand it. Now, I'm not at the table.
Right.
And I'm not fully.
We're just attorneys, right? Yeah.
Sure. Yes. So as I understand it, it's a number of factors. It's, performance, capabilities in terms of, ability to grow with the company. We're looking for someone who's going to be kind of coming in at the bottom. They are, and going to be able to hopefully assume the position for quite some time.
Okay.
And the nature of the executive culture requires that there be a certain level of camaraderie, and that it's as I understand it, it's most important to Bacchus that the individual who assumes Mr. Cobb's position kind of jives with the executive corporate culture.
Sure, and I think that one of my clients' major concerns is that that's just kind of code language for we want it to be a guy, like one of the bros, Sure. And so I think because in her mind, I think in my mind, when I look at her credentials and I see her track record with the company, it's very strong, and her persona and her demeanor is that of an executive, and she conducts herself that way. She puts in the extra time, on nights and weekends to get the job done. Right. She's only had stellar performance reviews from Mr. Cobb, and I think that as far as merits go, on the merits, she has a really good case to make for why she should be the next vice president in that role. That said, I mean, ultimately, it's up to them, and the chemistry of a executive team is really important in order for a company to be successful. Completely understand that. And I don't know kind of what influence, if I can lobby you to make her case to them,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if that's possible,
Right,
but
right.
I guess we are kind of trying to hammer out what her role would be. So I'm happy to kind of talk about, her case and I think her strengths for why she should have that role. But I think that kind of goes to the bigger question of like, what is her role going to be in the company moving
Mm-hmm.
forward?
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to kind of resolve this issue? Just the employment issue as opposed to the discrimination issue. So I think that what the core of my client's interests is just she has a desire to work for a company that recognizes her strengths. She wants to work for a company that that she believes in, but that believes in her as well. And I think she found that in Bacchus. I mean, she worked for a company called Admiral Cruise Lines for a number of years prior to working for Bacchus. I think about 5 years in their marketing department, and loved the company, but wanted to start working for a company that she thought she could stay with for a while and make an investment in it that would make an investment in her. And I think that based on her relationship with Mr. Cobb and how closely they interacted and how much Mr. Cobb trusted in her and believed in her abilities, she felt like, and she still feels like, I think that this VP position is perfectly suited to her strengths. And that is kind of her goal, and to just transition into that role. And I think if she was able to transition into that role, I think that the discrimination issue would be a much smaller component. I just think she's concerned, and I think I'm concerned too, that if she were not to get that role, based on kind of her knowledge of how she and Chavez have kind of interacted with relation to Mr. Cobb, if she were not to get that role, I think she would feel, and there's a strong case that it would be a case of employment discrimination, because compared to Cobb, I mean, there's just a huge disparity in the amount of work that they do and their experience levels and their just basic credentials.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those things warrant kind of taking a look at in relation to the discrimination issue. But I guess our first thought would be to promote Ms. Gossett into the VP position, to give her the same salary and benefits package that all the executives get and that Mr. Cobb received, and then kind of move forward from there.
Okay.
What do you think? What do you think of your client's interest in that option?
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. First of all, you hit on a number of important points about your client. Her credentials, her work ethic. That's part of what makes Ms. Gossett a huge asset to our company, to Bacchus, and is what drives our strong interest in keeping her around.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether or not that will take the form of a promotion to the vice presidency, the vice president position rather, is kind of uncertain. And we may not be able to guarantee that at this point. It sounds like folks at Bacchus aren't quite sure if the promotion time is now. Some of the other candidates that they're looking at, kind of have some of the strengths and just tick the boxes that are sort of needed in the board at this point. They're looking for a little bit of diversity. And then, of course, returning back to what we were talking about earlier with just being able to sort of jive, which I understand, your client feels is just code for
promoting Chavez. Yeah.
Sure, and of course, we disagree on that point. But, bottom line is that Ms. Gossett is a very valuable employee that Bacchus is interested in keeping around. So, rather than talking about, getting her into the vice president position for the public relations and marketing, which seems a little bit dubious at this point.
Do you think that the executives are more likely, or the decision makers are more likely to go to Chavez at this point? Or are they choosing other candidates altogether?
I think that Chavez looks like the likely candidate.
Okay.
As I said, the final decision hasn't been made at this point.
Okay.
But it looks like he, ticks the boxes that I was talking about in terms of filling the position and being a good fit for the public relations and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, Bacchus would like to keep Miss Gossett in the public relations and marketing department, and they're prepared to offer her a substantial raise,
Okay.
along with a benefits package that mirrors and in fact is the same as what she would get in the vice president position in the marketing and public relations. So,
Okay. And do you have those numbers specifically?
Sure, yeah. So we're prepared, or Bacchus is prepared to offer Ms. Gossett a $8,000 a year raise, along with the benefits package that the vice presidents get with the sports car. The choice between a sports car or a traditional or sports car, leased at Bacchus's expense.
Okay. And do you know the value of that benefits package?
Um,
Because we have a number that we've heard and just want to make sure that it's the same number.
I don't have a number for the sports car. I guess it would depend on what car Miss Gossett chooses to lease.
Right, and so what we've heard is there's a kind of an overall value of there's a value to the there's an overall value to the package, and then that would just include a sports car, but not in addition. So say if the package was just picking a out of the park number for the sake of hypothetical, if you had a $50,000 package, then if the sports car was $30,000, any other benefits that we included could not exceed $20,000. Right, so if the package is $10,000, say the lease of the sports car is $3,000, any additional benefits would not exceed $7,000. So the total, I'm just saying, kind of the total package overall would include the car, but would probably not only include the car. It would include a number of other things,
Right.
because it's a kind of a number. It's a price tag that you attach to it.
Right.
And so the numbers that I think thought, especially, and I think that I'm going to detach the discrimination issue because I have received a number of requests from my client about how she'd want to address that, but I'm going to detach those from the money talk about the employment at this point, just for the sake of trying to hammer out a deal on employment. Ms. Gossett, her past with Mr. Cobb and Mr. Chavez has been an interesting one because she had developed a strong relationship to Mr. Cobb.
Mm-hmm.
They worked really well together, and I think Mr. Cobb and my client would attest to the fact that a lot of Mr. Cobb's and the company's success as far as marketing and advertisement goes. I mean, we know that this cruise line, Bacchus Cruise Line, has the highest profits of any cruise line in the Western Hemisphere on a per ship basis,
Mm-hmm.
and I think a lot of that, especially in the public relations and marketing department, can be attributed to my client because she puts in a lot of time. She works behind the scenes. I mean, she's got years of experience in marketing. She has an undergraduate advertising degree from Manitoba University. She's got an MBA from there, and she's worked in marketing for 5 years at another cruise line. So I think if the reality is that Mr. Chavez is going to be promoted, and he's years he's years younger than she is. She has many years more experience. According to my client, he's sometimes his work ethic can be problematic. I mean, he doesn't put in the extra time that he needs to get the job done.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, my client has had to step in and bail him out to meet deadlines. And there's a couple other issues that my client's concerned about that I don't think are necessarily worth mentioning in this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But if if this is the candidate, if Mr. Chavez is the candidate that you want to promote over my client, there's a couple of things. I mean, my client is expressed to me, and I've been trying to talk her out of this a little bit, that if he's going to get the job, she wants to leave the company because she feels that him getting the job with their experiences, with her experience with him getting the job is an affront to her and would be almost insulting. And especially because she has all this experience, she's invested a lot of time in the company, and she has the recommendation of Mr. Cobb for this job, or at least that's what they've discussed, and that's what my client has represented to me. So I think that if Mr. Chavez, and I want to talk my client out of leaving the company if Mr. Chavez gets the job, because I think we can work out a deal where she's fairly compensated, recognized for her efforts.
Right.
Maybe we talk about a title change so that she's not an assistant to the VP, because I think that the last thing she'd want to do is work for someone who she doesn't have a great relationship with. But if she could be in an equivalent position within the company hierarchically, I think that would be important with her.
Right.
And I think that honestly, if she's going to stay with the company, it's going to have to be a bigger raise than $8,000.
Yeah.
And I mean, the number that we, I think, are shooting for is a $20,000 raise. So we are thinking of she's currently at $40,000. I think we just do it all in U.S. dollars to keep it easy.
Yeah.
She's currently at $40,000. We would like to see a raise to $60,000, and if we can change her title, I think that would be great. I mean, this is to stay with the company. Change her title, and then also just make sure that she's not reporting to Mr. Chavez directly. That she has kind of her own projects, that she has different boss.
Regardless of whether he's promoted to.
I think this would be if he was promoted. I think this would be the package we'd want.
So you.
Her idea would be to just be promoted to the VP position.
Right.
So that's our first choice, and that just comes with anything that Mr. Cobb had. That's all just hers now. And then I think that at that point, where Mr. Chavez goes is a little less important.
Right.
So that's the first one. But if I think that if I can bring a package back to my client that includes a significant raise, a title change, the fact that she wouldn't be reporting to Mr. Chavez, if I could bring her those things, then I think that I could convince her to stay with the company, and I think she wants to stay with the company deep down. I think that's what she wants. I think she's invested a lot in this company. The company's invested a lot in her, and she doesn't want to leave. I think she wants to stay, but I think that she wants to just be recognized for her efforts thus far, and that she wants her credentials and all her hard work up to this point to be recognized. So I think that the first and best option would be promote her to VP.
Right.
Beyond that, if Mr. Chavez is going to be promoted, I have some work to do with my client to try to talk her out of leaving the company.
Right.
But at that point, if it would involve a significant raise, at least $20,000. The benefits package, which I think we can negotiate on, a title change, and then just not to report to Mr. Chavez.
Okay.
And is that, I'm kind of wondering if that's something that the company would be interested in.
Certainly. And this is just speaking, aside from any potential lawsuit.
Yeah, there's the discrimination issue.
We don't have to reach that now, but
right. I'll just approach it. I mean, I think that my client feels strongly that there has been and will be potentially, if Mr. Chavez is promoted, blatant or flagrant sexual discrimination against her on the basis of sex. Sexual discrimination is on the basis of sex, but and that she's prepared to hold the threat of litigation over the company for that sexual discrimination. I think that a one lump sum of money would dissuade her of doing that. But I think that like I said, I initially detached that kind of conversation from the employment conversation. But if the benefits package or the salary increase, at least for the first year of salary, were to include a substantial bonus, I think that would really assuage all of her displeasure with the company's sexual discrimination. And so I think that's the issue in her mind.
Right.
Like I said, she said she's prepared to leave if Mr. Chavez gets the promotion. But if I can convince her that, here's the package, they appreciate, Bacchus appreciates her service and wants to compensate her for it, then she'll stay, and then we won't have to necessarily get too deep into the actual nitty gritty of whether this is discrimination or not.
Sure.
And so I'm curious, kind of what if we're going to start broaching the discrimination talk. I'm wondering what your client sees as far as that goes. I mean, I'm sure that legally they'd hold that there's no discrimination, but if we're just talking kind of conceptually about the fact that it's an all male group of executives, it's they're going to promote Mr. Chavez, who on paper doesn't look as qualified as my client. And I'm just kind of curious what your company's position is on that, or your client's position is on that.
Right. Well, of course, Bacchus's position is that, if Mr. Chavez were to be promoted to the vice president position over Ms. Gossett, that it wouldn't be on the basis of sex.
Mm-hmm.
It would be on the basis of a multitude of other factors. I understand that she's a few years his senior, does have more formal education, but of course the nature of business, there's a lot to be said for, a certain amount of just sort of street smarts that are inherent in business sense that you may or may not get in formal education. And I think that Bacchus sees that, regardless of what Ms. Gossett's CV may look like, that at least as of now, Mr. Chavez is more qualified for the position for other reasons. And that's not to say that Ms. Gossett isn't an asset to the company in other ways.
Right. I think that's fair. I think that the concern is that it if you stack up, if you just you make a pros and cons list and you stack up the reasons why Ms. Gossett should be promoted, and the reasons why Mr. Chavez would be promoted, to the general, I think, non-involved observer, it would look like Ms. Gossett had a stronger case to make for the VP position,
Sure.
Which would mean that these kind of intangible soft factors would have to be pretty significant in order to overcome these kind of
Right.
credential-based factors.
Sure.
And so I'm just kind of curious I want to get a sense from you, if you can, to articulate just what are these strengths that he has that are so intangible, or that are so kind of robust that he's able to overcome some of his other shortcomings, I guess, when it comes to how his experience is, and actually how his work ethic and recommendations have been, especially when the outgoing VP has a much stronger relationship with my client.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just curious if you can kind of articulate that, just so I can get a better sense of that and where the company's coming from on those factors.
Sure. Well, like I was saying, before, it's a combination of, we see his youth, as an asset. We've got a fresh face coming into the board. He's a very bright guy. Where he lacks in formal education, he makes up for in just natural, bright. He's a bright guy.
Mm-hmm.
And as I understand, Bacchus, places a high value on that in terms of having an executive type, managerial oversight, decision-making position, rather than just like putting in the hours and burning the midnight oil, just toiling away. It's the nature of that type of position requires a little more of that natural acuity.
Okay.
On top of that, the board has been looking to add some diversity, which of course Mr. Chavez provides. And in terms of the work ethic that that Ms. Gossett takes issue with, that he's kind of displayed over some time. That's news to me. I don't know anything about that. But
Okay.
of course, these are things that would be ironed out at length. At trial, would this come to litigation? which of course, you ask for a position, Bacchus's position. We'd like to avoid litigation.
Well, I think
obviously.
honestly, I would too. I'd like to resolve this. I'd like to bring back a few options to my client as far as financial options, employment options, and then say let's go this route. I think it seems like what you're saying is that Bacchus is actually really honestly invested in both of these people. They don't want to
That's
lose
correct.
either of these people.
Right.
But as far as the kind of specific qualities that are needed for this VP position, beyond paper credentials, what someone looks like on paper, that Mr. Chavez has the edge on my client.
Mm-hmm.
And that, that's their decision to make. But I think that if Bacchus is truly committed to having my client continue with the company, then I think that we should be able to kind of figure out a way that if she's not going to be able to get this position that she definitely feels she has earned over the course of these 3 years and with her hard work, then we could kind of create an equivalent position that would kind of satisfy her and make sure that she's provided with this sense of appreciation and acknowledgement for her hard work.
Right.
And I think that obviously includes a financial component.
Right.
So maybe back to the employment question.
Right.
If we were to say, if we were not to have a title of VP, but maybe like senior strategic marketing consultant or something like that,
right.
or senior PR, something with senior in it. Who knows the title? We can hammer that out maybe at a later date. But something like that's equivalent hierarchically to Mr. Chavez, that includes, let's say, a $60,000 a year salary, and maybe a $12,000 benefits package, which includes the car, and that's $72,000 total U.S. dollars a year. That is kind of the basic salary, and then maybe I think a 1-year bonus for my client because of the to kind of assuage her tense feelings about the discrimination issue. If Bacchus were willing to give her a 1-year bonus of $100,000. I think she would feel completely comfortable, and I think that's something that I could take back to her with confidence and say to you that she would probably accept that.
Okay. And of course, the bonus would come with a release of claims.
Yes, absolutely. We'd have her sign a release of claims. I mean, she stipulated to me that I actually cannot shake on any deal now. Anything that I do have to take back to her for final confirmation.
Okay.
But what I'm trying to do is get something that I can take back to her and get an okay on like the first time, so that we can just move forward.
Right. Well, I think that serves both of our interests.
Right. And I personally, and I know my client, she's very upset, and I think she has the right to be upset. I mean, she's worked really hard to get where she is.
Sure.
And I think that at the end, every person has their price, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, for her, I think that to kind of calm her anger a little bit and calm her nerves, that money does it. Money sometimes would do it. And I think that if Bacchus is really interested and truly wanted to make things right with her, I think that money can do that this time around.
Sure.
I think that is kind of like maybe the universal signal of appreciation, right? If they're going to throw some money her way, but it would have to come with a raise, and I think that what my client is shooting for is that $60,000 a year and $12,000 a year benefits package.
Okay. So here's what I'll propose on behalf of Bacchus. They'd like to propose a title change from. Well, let me back up and say that there's one thing that Bacchus is absolutely certain of. It's they are extremely happy with the job that Ms. Gossett is currently doing and did for as an assistant to Mr. Cobb. And so ideally, they'd like to keep her there for the time being. This isn't to say that they're ruling out promotion for Ms. Gossett at some point in the future, but they'd like to keep her in the same position. With that said, they'd like to propose a title change for Ms. Gossett to an executive assistant to the vice president of marketing and public relations.
So that means she would still be reporting to Mr. Chavez.
She would still be, reporting, or if that's the way you phrase it, performing the same duties.
Well, if Mr. Chavez is the vice president and she's executive assistant to the vice president,
right, she would be in a supportive role.
Right, and I think that's the first thing that my client wants to avoid.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest with you, I think that she would prefer. I think that she was effective in her job with Mr. Cobb because they worked well as a team, and she was able to effectively support him in a number of capacities because of his leadership and their strong relationship. I think that when it comes to Mr. Chavez, I don't think that relationship is there, and I think that my client has some questions about Mr. Chavez's work ethic that might mean that his shortcomings in her mind would reflect on her and would disable her from potentially doing the same job that she did as Mr. Cobb's assistant.
Sure.
And I think and honestly, I think that with the enraged feelings or the kind of sense of frustration, the strong sense of frustration that my client has right now, I think that if I were to go back and say, this is the deal I got for you. I know that you're upset about sexual discrimination, but all I got for you was to work for Mr. Chavez again, is to work for this guy who. That's a tough thing for me to take back to my client. I mean, it's a really tough thing.
Listen, I understand that, and having one of her primary interests and problems with the situation being problems with working relationships with Mr. Chavez. Maybe that's not the best situation for the company anyways. We want to create an environment where everybody's working together,
right.
In a congenial way.
Mm-hmm.
That's what helps, keep Bacchus the profitable company that it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's think about this.
Can we have her do, I mean, if there was some kind of intermediary, I think that if she were to do the same tasks, but I think that for her it's being an assistant to a person who she can't. She would have. I think she would just have trouble supporting him, and I think that if we could remove or decouple them from, if she could do the same kind of tasks without necessarily supporting, I think it'd be tough. I mean, if your ultimate goal is to have her in a supportive role for the new vice president, and that new vice president is Mr. Chavez, that's going to be something that I don't think I can take back to my client.
Okay.
I think that what she would want is a position that comes with a raise, that comes with this benefits package, and a potential kind of release of claim settlement about the discrimination issue. But where she would be, at least at an equivalent place hierarchically with Mr. Chavez. At least as far as the company goes. I think that when it comes to the tasks that she does, I think that she might still be perfectly willing to do the job she was doing. But you have to understand that being in a support, it's psychologically and emotionally. If I brought that back to her, I am almost guaranteeing you that she would not go along with it.
Okay.
So if there's a way to even take, rather than, she wants to make at least what Mr. Cobb was making, at least.
Okay.
She was hoping for more.
Right.
She wants to make at least what Mr. Cobb was making and have that same benefits package.
Okay. Here's and I should issue the disclaimer that I as well am only authorized to make certain offers,
Mm-hmm.
and beyond that, I would have to seek approval from Bacchus.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, but what I'd like to propose, maybe you could bring back to your client, Ms.
Right.
Gossett.
What we could do also is make contingent agreements. We could say
right.
if this happens then this, if this happens then this.
Right. So
and that could also help us out. But I just want to. The one thing I want to avoid bringing back to my client, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but the one thing I just want to avoid bringing back to my client is saying their proposal is that you work for Mr. Chavez. I think that would only serve to anger her more, and that would not be a solution. That would, I think, just exacerbate the problem.
Okay.
And so, just
I understand that there's a bit of animosity between the two. So tell me what you think about this. Speaking of contingency, if we iron out, separately an raise amount and a benefits package, and of course the title change, maybe having it contingent on seeing how things work out, because I understand they've had somewhat of a working relationship thus far, but they haven't quite worked together in the fashion that they would were Mr. Chavez to be promoted.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking about maybe having some sort of 90-day, let's try this out. You, Ms. Gossett, will assume the position of executive assistant to the vice president of marketing and public relations, for a 90-day period. And then we check back in at that point and see about maybe making some moves, alternative moves at that point. If it truly, and having some sort of supervision and checking in during that 90-day period and kind of seeing objectively how they're working together.
I think that's a fair offer. I think that, if it were me in Miss Gossett's shoes, I would kind of say, I'm gonna put up with it for 90 days, but I'm not gonna be any happy about this, 3 months from now. And I think that money goes so far. I mean, the recognition comes from money, but I think that it's the recognition is kind of negated by the slight that I think she would feel by having to work for someone who she thinks is not a good worker,
Mm-hmm.
is not as qualified, and so I think that there's just an imbalance there. I mean, it's an idea, and I would be willing to mention that to her, but I think that she'd say that's a terrible. I don't think that she'd go for it.
Yeah.
I think what if we did something like decoupled the public relations and marketing components? Vice president for marketing and a vice president for public relations, and you made And they maybe they would work closely and they would both be promoted. But you had Mr. Chavez as the vice president for marketing, and you had Ms. Gossett as the vice president for public relations. And both of them would receive raises. They'd both receive, and that way you keep both of them and recognize, and they wouldn't have to, and it would silo kind of every issue, so that there would be no discrimination issue. And I think at that point, if we were able to do that and just create two different vice president positions, Ms. Gossett would feel recognized. Mr. Chavez would be able to have his promotion and be able to, and you could even create a whole new set. And I'm sure with my client's experience, you could create a whole new set of tasks and responsibilities, building out the entire PR component of the company, while still letting Chavez conduct all the business that Bacchus wanted him to do in his new role, using his business acuity and youthful vigor and enthusiasm. I think that they would both be really effective. I think at that point, I think if I brought that back to my client would be very happy and would be willing to definitely sign a release of claims for discrimination and probably not even ask for anything for that at that point. Because I think that if she sees him get promoted, but also sees her get promoted to a VP role, I think that might even kind of smooth out the wrinkles in their relationship.
Right.
And I don't know if you're authorized to kind of propose that to them and say, hey, let's rather than one VP over these two different things, marketing and public relations, why don't we, separate those and make two vice presidents?
Right. I don't think that's a bad idea. That's something that's come to my mind. Just looking at Ms. Gossett's file here. Her experience with Admiral Cruise Lines was in the marketing department. And Mr. Chavez, I think in terms of, if he has a hole, it may be in the marketing department. So maybe, perhaps that's slack that Ms. Gossett could pick up, were the position to be split in such a way.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, I'm not authorized to agree to that now, but that's certainly something I think is reasonable, and I can bring back to Bacchus.
Okay.
So
and
let's
at that point. Sorry.
So if we're talking about that, there would have to be some adjustments elsewhere. So let's say, were this agreement to take that form, that Ms. Gossett is the
Vice President of
executive
Marketing.
vice president of marketing,
Mm-hmm.
and Mr. Chavez will assume the vice president of public relations.
Mm-hmm.
Bacchus would be prepared to offer her a raise, not of $20,000. We could go to 15.
Okay.
Um,
I think that at that point it just makes sense that anything that Chavez would get as a vice president, she would get as a vice
Right,
president.
okay.
So their raises and their thing would be completely equal.
okay.
So that the only because the issue is it might not right now. There's a question of whether it's discrimination. But if you pay Chavez more as promoting him to vice president, and then don't pay him more than my client, then that's definitely discrimination.
Right.
So.
Well, right, sure. But also this, let's bear in mind that this vice president position doesn't exist.
It's true.
So
it's very true. No, that's true.
So what I'm looking at, what Bacchus would feasibly agree to is making this split, offering the same benefits package, which would be the $15,000, the sports car,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have Ms. Gossett sign a release of the claims.
Right.
Okay.
I think that's a fair deal.
All right.
Yeah, I'd be willing to take that back to her. I mean, I need to get final approval. I think that the fact that I think she ultimately saw any promotion of Chavez being discrimination. But I think that if they're both promoted and we're able to kind of silo them and let them kind of do what their strengths are,
Mm-hmm.
then I think that's a good deal, and I think that I can probably convince my client to sign a release of claims, and the discrimination issue at that point can go away because she's getting the recognition she needs.
Right.
And I think that if she's getting the recognition she needs, it's not like she doesn't want good things for Chavez at that point. I think that if it's like the both of them and there's one position, then it's like she thinks that she should have it. But I think if we're doing it this way, I think that the discrimination issue goes away in large part, and I'm definitely willing to take that away from my client. I really appreciate you being so cooperative and collaborative because I think that'd be a really great solution to this.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
All right, so let's just recap for my sake here.
Okay.
Make sure we're on the same page. We're gonna split and seek approval separately of our client's approval of having Ms. Gossett take the VP of marketing position. Chavez will take the VP of public relations. They'll have the same benefits package, which irons out to be a $15,000 a year,
including the car. Right? So make sure that the car is still
$15,000 plus the car.
Okay.
So separate of that, I can't necessarily put a monetary value.
Sure.
Whatever, a BMW goes for $325.
I think that's more than fair.
$300 a month.
Yeah, right. I'd love that BMW.
Right. So and then a release of claims, and then
we shake hands and we'll call it a day and go into our next client meetings.
Right, and keep spring breaking.
And I'll drive my 1991 Volvo home. My one-bedroom house because I work in a rinky-dink firm. But hey, we rep important clients.
Indeed. All right. Well, I think that's an equitable solution.
Great.
I think that's something that hopefully both parties will be happy with.
Yeah, me too. Well, thanks so much for your time. I'm glad we
Yeah.
could do this amicably and that we came to something that I think seems like a really, really fair deal.
Indeed.
Great.
Yeah. Likewise.
Thanks so much, Rachel.
Yeah. You too.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.